When you picture an Egyptian queen, someone like Cleopatra, what pops into your head? It's probably those towering golden crowns, the striped headdresses, these super elaborate robes, right? I mean, we see it everywhere, in movies, in art. But what if I told you that entire image is only half the story? What if it was all just a carefully crafted piece of political theater designed to keep a whole empire in line? Well, let's pull back the curtain.
So let's just get right to it. The big question. What did the last pharaoh of Egypt, one of the most famous women in all of history, actually put on in the morning? The answer is probably not what you're thinking.
I mean, for thousands of years, this is the image we've had. These incredible tomb paintings and temple carvings that show pharaohs in their full godlike outfits. This was the official record, right? This is the face they wanted to present to their gods and to their people for all eternity. But their daily life, especially by the time Cleopatra was around, that was a completely different picture.
Okay, so before we can even get to Cleopatra, we've got to understand why this traditional headwear was such a huge deal in the first place. In ancient Egypt, a crown wasn't just a fancy hat. It was the ultimate symbol of your power, your legitimacy, your divine right to rule. It was everything.
These crowns were like a direct hotline to the gods. They were a symbol of absolute power that everyone would recognize in a split second, and they were absolutely essential for all the religious ceremonies that, were believed to keep the entire universe in balance. Honestly, a pharaoh without a crown was basically naked.
Now get ready for this, because it's an incredible fact. Despite finding tombs just overflowing with gold and every other treasure imaginable, archaeologists have never, not once, found a single royal crown from this entire period. So why? Well, it's pretty likely they were made from delicate stuff, fabric or leather, things that just disintegrated over thousands of years. The only proof we have they even existed is the art they left behind.
And that art tells this fantastic story, starting with the very birth of Egypt as we know it. See, before it was this one great kingdom, it was actually two separate lands, and each one had its own king and its own special crown.
So over on the left, you've got the Deshret. That's the red crown of Lower Egypt up in the north with that cool spiral thing. And on the right, that's the Hedjet, the tall, white, kind of bowling pin-shaped crown of Upper Egypt down south. For a really long time, these two symbols represented two totally different and often warring powers.
And then, this one moment changes everything in history. Around 3100 BC, a ruler, a guy by the name of King Menes, he conquers the north and unites the two lands, founding the very first Egyptian dynasty. But to show off his new, unified kingdom, he needed a powerful new symbol.
And his solution was just brilliant. So simple. He just combined them. This is the pshent, or as it's often called, the double crown. It's literally the white crown of the south sitting right inside the red crown of the north. If you wore this, you were telling the entire world you weren't just some king, you were the ruler of all of Egypt.
Of course, the royal wardrobe had a lot more than just one crown. Different situations called for different headwear. So let's do a quick lightning round of some of the other really important pieces.
First up, the keprish.
This one's also known as the blue crown, or more excitingly, the war crown. Seriously, think of this as the pharaoh's action helmet. It was probably made of hardened blue cloth or leather, and it's what he wore when he was leading armies into battle. If you saw the pharaoh in this crown, you knew things were about to get serious.
Next, we've got the Atef crown. This one had a really deep spiritual meaning. It was connected to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. It's basically the white crown, but with two big ostrich feathers on the sides. And those feathers were powerful symbols of Ma'at, which was the divine idea of truth and justice.
And finally, the one you absolutely know, even if you don't know its name, the Nimbus headdress. Okay, so here's the thing. Technically, this isn't a crown at all. It's actually a striped linen cloth. But because of the absolutely stunning death mask of King Tut, it has become the most iconic symbol of a pharaoh's power in the entire world.
So for 3,000 years, we have this incredible, unbroken tradition of Egyptian royal fashion. But then, everything changed. After Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, a whole new dynasty of Greek rulers, the Ptolemies, took the throne. And this, right here, is where our whole Hollywood idea of Cleopatra just starts to completely fall apart.
I want you to just let that quote sink in for a second. All of those elaborate, traditional Egyptian costumes we see Cleopatra wearing in the movies, according to the actual historical evidence, that is simply not what she would have been wearing day to day.
So what was she wearing? Well, in her everyday life, at court, it was this: Greek fashion.
The whole Hellenistic world, which she was a part of, they loved the chiton and the himation, which are basically just simple, really elegant, draped linen garments. You have to remember, culturally, she and her family were Macedonians, who just happened to be living in Egypt.
So that begs the question, right? Why do we have all this temple art that shows Cleopatra and her family dressed up like traditional Egyptian pharaohs? Well, this is where we get into the brilliant political strategy behind their wardrobe.
This slide really lays out the two sides of their rule. On one hand, you have their daily reality. In the court at Alexandria, the Ptolemies were Greek through and through. They spoke Greek, they wore Greek clothes, they lived in a Greek-style culture. But for official art, for the temples, for anything that their native Egyptian subjects were going to see, they put on the costume. They wore the full pharaonic getup, including the double crown, all to present themselves as the legitimate divine rulers of Egypt. It was nothing short of brilliant, calculated propaganda.
So you see, Cleopatra's closet wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect reflection of the deeply divided world that she was ruling over. In a way, she had to be two different queens at the exact same time.
In the big, cosmopolitan, Greek-speaking cities like Alexandria, that Hellenistic fashion was king. But you go out into the rural countryside where the vast majority of the Egyptian people lived, and they just kept on wearing their traditional linen kilts and tunics, just like their ancestors had done for thousands of years. What you wore was a powerful statement about who you were and where you fit in this really complex multicultural kingdom.
And that really leaves us with a fascinating final thought, doesn't it? Cleopatra's wardrobe proves that the images rulers leave behind are so often a performance, not a reality. It makes you wonder, how much of the history that we think we know is really just the propaganda that happened to survive?